There is a particular kind of heartbreak in watching your own body change beneath you, slowly, year after year, until one day you look in the mirror and don't quite recognize the person staring back. It isn't sudden, it creeps in. A knee that aches climbing stairs it used to run up to at a time, eyes that need more and more light to read the same page, hands that used to thread a needle in seconds now trembling over the simplest task. For a person who spent decades being the strong one, the one who carried groceries in from the car in a single trip, who fixed things around the house, who stayed up all night with a sick child, this slow erosion of physical capability is not just inconvenient. It is disorienting. It forces a kind of daily negotiation with a body that no longer fully cooperates, a body that now needs to be asked nicely, rested, medicated, and monitored. Mornings often begin with a small ritual most younger people never think about, sorting the day's pills into the right order, checking blood pressure, testing balance before standing up too quickly. What used to be seconds of getting out of bed can now take minutes of careful, deliberate movement. A simple walk to the mailbox becomes a small expedition requiring the right shoes, a steady hand on the railing, and enough energy saved up from earlier in the day. And it isn't just about mobility, it's about identity. When your body was strong, you were the person others leaned on. Now, in many small and large ways, you find yourself needing to lean on others, and that shift, more than the physical pain itself, is often the hardest part to accept. There's also a quieter kind of physical loss that rarely gets talked about, the senses dimming. Food doesn't taste quite the way it used to. Music doesn't sound as sharp. Faces across the room blur just slightly more than they did last year. The world doesn't disappear all at once. It simply becomes a little less vivid, a little further away. Every single year, chronic pain becomes, for many, simply part of daily life, not something to be fixed, but something to be managed, endured, worked around. Arthritis in the joints, a back that never quite recovered from decades of physical labor. The dull, constant ache that becomes so familiar, it almost stops being noticed, except on the days it flares up, and reminds you all over again just how much has changed. What makes this especially painful is the loneliness inside it. Physical decline is often invisible to everyone except the person experiencing it. Family members see someone getting older, a phrase so soft and vague it hides the daily reality underneath it. They don't see the extra 10 minutes it now takes to get dressed. They don't see the careful planning that goes into a simple outing. They don't see the quiet moments of frustration when a body that used to do everything without being asked now refuses to cooperate with even the smallest requests. And through all of it, most elderly people don't complain, not because it doesn't hurt, but because they've learned, often over a lifetime, that complaining rarely changes anything, and that the people around them have their own lives, their own worries, their own busy schedules to attend to. So the pain gets folded quietly into daily routine, carried without much acknowledgement, treated as simply the cost of having lived this long. Independence is something most of us never think about until it starts slipping away. For decades, an adult manages their own life without a second thought, driving where they need to go, handling their own finances, making their own decisions about their own body and their own home. And then slowly, piece by piece, some of that independence begins to be quietly taken away. It might start with something as simple as a family member suggesting it's maybe not the best idea to drive at night anymore. Reasonable, perhaps. Safety-minded, certainly. But underneath the practical logic is something much heavier, the slow removal of control over one's own life, one small decision at a time. Then it might be the finances, a well-meaning child stepping in to help manage things, which starts as assistance and can slowly become total control. Then it might be decisions about where to live, whether to keep the family home, how to spend the day, who to see and when. Each individual change might make sense on its own, but stacked together over months and years, they add up to something that can feel less like being cared for and more like being slowly erased from the driver's seat of your own life. This is one of the cruelest ironies of growing old. The very people trying to protect you are sometimes, without realizing it, taking away the thing that makes life feel worth living, the simple dignity of making your own choices. Imagine spending 60, 70 years being the one who decided things, where the family would live, how the budget would be spent, what values would be passed down to the next generation, and then slowly finding yourself in rooms where decisions about your own life are being made without you, or worse, in front of you, as if you're not quite capable of understanding your own circumstances anymore. There is a particular kind of pain in being spoken about instead of spoken to. In having a doctor's appointment, where the doctor addresses your adult child instead of you, even though you are the patient. In hearing, we think it's best if, instead of being asked, what do you think is best? These moments, small as they seem individually, chip away at something enormous. The felt sense of still being a full, capable, respected adult. And yet, this is important. Needing help is not the same as needing to be erased. The struggle isn't really about accepting help. Most elderly people are perfectly willing to accept help when it's offered with respect, with patience, and most importantly, with their voice still included in the decision. The struggle is about how that help is often given, quickly, efficiently, sometimes without much conversation, because everyone else is busy, and it's simply faster to decide for someone than to decide with them. There is a particular kind of silence that settles into a home once the children have grown and gone, once the noise and chaos of raising a family has faded into memory. For years, maybe decades, that house was loud. Arguments over homework, laughter over dinner, the sound of feet running down hallways, doors slamming, music playing too loud from a teenager's room. It was, in its own chaotic way, alive. And then gradually, it wasn't anymore. One child moves out for college and never quite fully moves back. Another gets married and starts their own home across town or across the country. Grandchildren are born, but they live their own busy lives, visiting on holidays, maybe a phone call here and there. And the parents, the ones who built that noisy, chaotic, beautiful home, are left standing in rooms that used to be full and are now simply quiet. Morning comes, and there's no one to make breakfast for. Evening comes, and there's no one waiting at the table. The television becomes, for many, not entertainment but company, a way to fill a silence that would otherwise feel unbearable. Some people talk to their pets more than they talk to another human being on a given day. Some people find themselves narrating their own actions out loud just to hear a voice in the room, even if it's their own. This kind of loneliness is different from simply being alone. Many elderly people are perfectly capable of enjoying solitude, a quiet morning with coffee, a good book, time with their own thoughts. The loneliness that hurts is different. It's the loneliness of being forgotten. It's checking the phone throughout the day, hoping for a message that doesn't come. It's remembering a grandchild's birthday perfectly, while wondering if anyone remembers theirs. It's sitting through an entire week without a single meaningful conversation, without anyone asking how they're really doing and actually waiting to hear the honest answer. There's a particular kind of heartbreak in overhearing and or imagining that a conversation where your own child says, "I'm busy right now. We'll talk later," and knowing that later might mean days, might mean weeks. Not because the child doesn't love their parent, most of the time they do, deeply, but because life has simply filled up with its own noise, careers, children of their own, the endless urgent demands of being a busy adult in a busy world, and so a strange and painful role reversal takes place. The person who once dropped everything for their children, who rearranged their entire life around a sick child, a school play, a late-night phone call, now waits patiently, quietly, for even a fraction of that same attention in return. Most of the time they wait without saying anything, because they don't want to guilt anyone. They don't want to be that parent. They don't want to add pressure to lives that are already, they understand, incredibly full. But the waiting still happens, and the silence in the house still settles in day after day, whether anyone acknowledges it or not. For those who experience it, losing a life partner after decades together is one of the most profound griefs a person can face, and it is a grief that rarely gets the space or attention it deserves, especially as time goes on and the world expects the surviving spouse to simply move forward. Imagine sharing a life with someone for 40, 50, 60 years. Every morning routine built around two people. Every joke that only makes sense because someone else remembers the same story. Every decision, from what to have for dinner to how to raise children to how to face hard times, made together, discussed together, carried together. And then one day that person is gone, and the survivor is left not just grieving a person, but grieving an entire way of living that no longer exists. The house doesn't just feel quieter. It feels fundamentally different. A side of the bed that stays empty. A chair at the table that no one sits in anymore. Habits built over decades, making 2 cups of coffee instead of 1. Setting 2 plates instead of 1 that take months, sometimes years to unlearn, and that ache every single time they're remembered. There is also a particular kind of loneliness in being one of the only people left who remembers certain things. The inside jokes, the private nicknames, the small ordinary moments that made up an entire shared life. Moments that, once that partner is gone, exist only in one person's memory, with no one left to say remember when, and actually remember it the same way. And beyond the emotional loss, there is often a practical unraveling too. A spouse who handled the finances is gone, and the survivor has to learn, sometimes for the first time in their life, how to manage bills and budgets alone. A spouse who did the cooking is gone, and the survivor has to learn to cook for one, which is its own strange and lonely skill. Every single daily task that used to be shared or divided now falls entirely on one set of shoulders. Shoulders that are, by this point in life, often already tired. Friends and family typically show up in the immediate aftermath. Flowers, casseroles, condolence calls. But grief for a lifelong partner doesn't end after a few weeks. It continues quietly for years. And often the support fades much faster than the grief does. 6 months later, most people have moved on with their own lives, assuming the survivor has adjusted. Meanwhile, the survivor might still be reaching for the phone to tell their partner something, out of pure habit, before remembering all over again that there's no one on the other end anymore. There's a specific kind of pain in slowly becoming invisible, in your own family's decision-making, even while you're standing right there in the room. It often starts small. A family discussion about a holiday plan, and somehow the older parent's preferences get quietly overruled without much conversation. A decision about a family property, made mostly among the adult children, with the parent informed rather than consulted. A doctor's visit where questions get directed at whoever came along for support, rather than the patient themselves. None of this usually comes from malice. Most families genuinely love their elderly parents and would be horrified to think they were making them feel small or unimportant. But it happens anyway. A slow, often unconscious shift in whose opinions carry weight, whose voice gets asked for first, whose preferences get treated as central versus optional phrases like "you wouldn't understand." This or "this isn't something you need to worry about" are usually meant kindly, an attempt to protect an aging parent from stress or complexity. But from the other side, those same phrases can land very differently. They can feel like being quietly demoted from decision maker to bystander in your own life, in your own family, in a home you may have built with your own hands and paid for with decades of your own labor. This is especially painful for people who spent their entire adult lives being the ones others turned to for guidance. The parent whose advice was sought before a big decision, whose opinion mattered in every family conversation, whose wisdom was for years treated as valuable. To go from that role to one where your input is politely acknowledged and then quietly set aside is a loss that doesn't show up on any medical chart, but is deeply, painfully real. Some elderly people respond to this by pulling back, offering opinions less often, because they've learned that offering them doesn't seem to change much anyway. This isn't peace. It's often a quiet kind of resignation, a slow withdrawal from full participation in their own family's life. Because participating and being overlooked repeatedly hurts more than simply staying quiet. And in the hardest cases, this dynamic escalates into something even more painful. Decisions about where an elderly parent will live, how their assets will be handled, or what kind of care they'll receive, made almost entirely by adult children, sometimes with genuine good intentions, sometimes with far less noble motivations, but either way, often without the elderly person having as much say as they deserve in decisions about their own life. The world does not wait for anyone to catch up, and for many elderly people, one of the quiet daily struggles is simply trying to keep pace with a world that seems to change faster every single year. Technology is perhaps the clearest example. A generation that grew up writing letters by hand, making phone calls on landlines, and paying bills in person now finds itself expected to navigate smartphones, apps, online banking, video calls, and endless software updates, often with little patience from the people around them for how confusing and intimidating that transition can be. Something as simple as ordering food, checking in for a doctor's appointment, or even paying for groceries can now require navigating an app, a QR code, or a self-checkout machine. Technology that assumes a level of comfort and familiarity that many older adults simply never had the chance to build. And when they struggle with it, they're sometimes met not with patience, but with visible frustration from those around them. A sigh from someone in line behind them, an eye roll from a young customer service worker, an unspoken message that they don't quite belong in this fast-moving world anymore. This goes beyond just gadgets. It touches almost every part of daily life. The way people communicate has shifted from phone calls to text messages to social media, in ways that can leave older adults feeling like they're perpetually a step behind. Watching their grandchildren communicate in ways they don't fully understand. Missing out on family updates that get shared in group chats they were never quite taught how to use. There's also something deeply isolating about watching the physical world around you change too. The corner store where you knew the owner by name closes and becomes something else. The neighborhood you raised your children in looks almost unrecognizable now. Old friends move away or pass away, and the familiar landmarks of an entire life, and both physical and social, slowly disappear, replaced by things that feel foreign, fast, and not built with you in mind. It's a strange kind of grief, not for a single loss, but for an entire world slowly disappearing around you while you're still very much alive in it. Ask many elderly people what frightens them most about growing older, and it's rarely death itself. Far more often, it's the fear of losing independence and of becoming, in their own words, a burden. This fear touches nearly every part of daily life. The fear of a fall that leads to a hospital stay that leads to needing full-time care. The fear of a diagnosis that changes everything overnight. The fear of running out of savings and having to ask children for financial help. A role reversal that can feel deeply uncomfortable for someone who spent their entire adult life being the provider, not the one being provided for. For a generation that often equates self-worth with self-sufficiency. A generation raised to work hard, take care of themselves, and not ask for help unless absolutely necessary. Needing assistance with basic daily tasks can feel less like simply aging and more like a kind of quiet failure, even though it's the most natural thing in the world. There's a particular vulnerability in needing help with things that used to be entirely private and automatic. Getting dressed, bathing, managing medication, even something as simple as getting to the bathroom safely. Needing assistance with these things doesn't just require physical help from someone else. It requires a kind of emotional surrender, a willingness to be seen in moments of vulnerability that most adults spend their entire lives avoiding. And the financial dimension of dependence carries its own particular sting. A person who spent decades budgeting carefully, saving diligently, providing for a family may still find themselves in their final years facing medical costs that outpace whatever they manage to save. Asking an adult child for money, even when that child offers willingly and lovingly, can feel like undoing a lifetime of hard-earned independence in a single, uncomfortable conversation. This fear of dependence often leads elderly people to hide struggles they're actually experiencing, minimizing pain during doctor visits, insisting they're managing fine when they're not, avoiding conversations about needing more help because they don't want to become a problem for anyone. This silence, while understandable, often means that real needs go unaddressed far longer than they should, simply because asking for help feels like too heavy a cost to their sense of dignity. Perhaps one of the most heartbreaking undercurrents running through so much of the elderly experience is a quiet, persistent fear of being too much trouble, too much worry, too much responsibility for the people they love. This shows up in small ways constantly, not mentioning a new ache or pain because it's probably nothing and they don't want to worry anyone. Declining an invitation to stay longer at a family gathering because they don't want to impose. Insisting they're fine living alone even when loneliness has become nearly unbearable. Admitting, because otherwise might mean uprooting their children's lives to help. There is an entire emotional economy that many elderly people quietly perform every day. constantly weighing their own needs against the perceived burden those needs might place on others, and very often choosing to suppress their own needs rather than risk being seen as demanding, needy, or difficult. This self-sacrifice often goes completely unnoticed by the people it's meant to protect. Adult children, busy with their own lives, may have no idea just how much their aging parent is quietly managing alone, precisely because that parent has worked so hard to make sure they never find out. The very love that makes an elderly parent want to protect their children from worry is the same love that can leave that parent isolated, struggling silently, simply because they refuse to ask for the help they actually need. It's a painful irony. The generation that spent their entire lives sacrificing for their children continues to sacrifice, even in their most vulnerable years, still trying to protect their children from the full weight of what growing old actually feels like. For many families, there comes a point where a difficult conversation can no longer be avoided. Whether an aging parent can safely continue to live alone, or whether some form of assisted living or care facility has become necessary. This conversation, no matter how gently it's approached, often lands as one of the hardest moments in an elderly person's life. It can feel less like a practical decision about safety and more like the final confirmation that independence, as they've known it for their entire adult life, is coming to an end. There's grief in leaving a family home, sometimes a home lived in for decades, filled with memories in every room, every corner holding some piece of a life built slowly over the years. Deciding what to keep and what to let go of, when so much of what fills that house isn't just furniture but memory, is one of the quietly devastating parts of this transition that rarely gets acknowledged for how difficult it truly is. And even in the best, most loving, most well-run care facilities, there's often an underlying sense of loss that no amount of good care can fully soften. The loss of full autonomy, of privacy, of a life lived entirely on one's own terms. Meals at scheduled times instead of whenever hunger strikes. A smaller space, often shared decisions about daily routine. A shift from being the one who manages a household to being in some ways managed themselves. For those who feel that this decision was made for them rather than with them, a decision discussed primarily among adult children, with the elderly parent informed rather than truly consulted, the transition can carry an additional layer of grief. The sense that their own voice mattered less in, perhaps the most significant decision of their remaining years. This doesn't mean care facilities are inherently wrong, or that families making these difficult decisions don't love their parents deeply. Very often, these decisions come from genuine concern for safety and well-being, but the emotional weight of the transition, for the person living through it, deserves to be acknowledged honestly, rather than glossed over with reassurances that everything will be fine. There's a particular, cumulative grief that comes with growing older that younger people rarely have to face. The slow, steady loss of an entire generation of friends one by one, over years and decades. For someone in their 70s or 80s, funerals can become a painfully regular occurrence. A childhood friend passes, then a former colleague, then a neighbor who lived next door for 30 years, then a sibling. Each loss is its own individual grief, but together, they add up to something larger and heavier. The slow realization that the circle of people who remember your shared history, who understand references from decades ago without needing them explained, who simply knew you across a lifetime, is shrinking. Year after year, this kind of grief is rarely given the space it deserves. Younger family members, even loving ones, often can't fully grasp what it means to lose someone you've known for 60 years, someone who was present for nearly every major chapter of your life. The condolences offered are often brief, well-meaning but limited, because the depth of that particular loss, the loss of someone who was a living witness to your entire life story, is hard to fully communicate to someone who hasn't yet experienced anything like it themselves. And there's an additional, quieter fear that comes with each loss. The awareness that the pool of people available for genuine connection and companionship keeps getting smaller at exactly the stage of life when connection and companionship matter more than ever. Making new close friendships later in life is possible, but often more difficult. Shared history takes time to build, and time is something that, at this stage of life, feels increasingly precious and limited. There is something deeply moving about the way many elderly people hold on to memory, not just as nostalgia, but as a kind of anchor, a way of staying connected to a version of the world and a version of themselves that no longer exists anywhere except inside their own mind. Old photographs get looked at again and again, not out of boredom, but because each one holds an entire world inside it. A wedding day, a first home, children who are now grown and gray-haired themselves, friends who are no longer living, moments that mattered enormously and are now preserved only in a fading photograph and an aging memory. Stories get retold, sometimes to the quiet exasperation of family members who've heard them many times before. But for the person telling them, each retelling is a way of keeping something alive, a way of making sure that a moment that mattered doesn't simply disappear when they do. There is also, for many, real fear around memory itself, not just nostalgia for the past, but a quiet, persistent worry about forgetting, about losing pieces of themselves and their history before they are ready to let go. Small moments of forgetfulness that would be brushed off easily by a younger person can trigger real anxiety in someone older, a fear that this is the beginning of losing themselves entirely. And there's a particular sadness in realizing that so much of what you remember most vividly, the specific way a childhood street smelled, the exact sound of a parent's voice, the small details of a moment 50 years ago, exists now almost entirely within you, with fewer and fewer people left who share those same memories, who could confirm, yes, I remember that too. For many people, especially those who spent decades in a career, in a specific professional identity, retirement brings a quiet, difficult question that doesn't have an easy answer. Who am I? Now that I'm no longer defined by what I did every day, for years, maybe decades, so much of a person's identity, routine, and sense of purpose is built around their work, the role they played, the problems they solved, the way they contributed to something larger than themselves. And then one day, that role simply ends. The alarm clock that used to mean something no longer needs to be set. The skills built over a lifetime are suddenly, in a practical sense, no longer needed by anyone. Some people transition into retirement gracefully, filling their time with hobbies, family, travel, new pursuits. But for many others, the loss of that daily sense of purpose leaves behind a real and painful void. Long days with no clear structure, a nagging sense of not being useful or needed in the way they once were. A quiet grief for a professional identity that took a lifetime to build and disappeared in practical terms, almost overnight. This loss of purpose often intersects painfully with the earlier themes we've discussed: the loneliness, the feeling of being left out of decisions, the fear of dependence. Together they can create a difficult internal question that many elderly people carry silently. If I'm no longer working, no longer fully independent, no longer central to my family's decisions, no longer physically capable of everything I once was, what is my purpose now? What do I still contribute? Why am I still here? These are not questions with simple answers, and they deserve far more thoughtful attention, both from society and from families, than they typically receive. There's a broader societal layer to all of this that goes beyond any individual family's dynamics. The way that modern culture, in many ways, quietly renders elderly people invisible. Advertising is built almost entirely around youth. Popular culture celebrates young, fast-paced, constantly changing trends. Public spaces are often designed without much thought for slower movement, weaker eyesight, or the particular needs of aging bodies. Even language itself often carries subtle bias. Phrases like over the hill or the casual, careless way society sometimes treats aging as something to be feared, joked about or avoided, rather than respected. Walk through most public spaces and notice how often elderly people are treated as obstacles rather than people, sighed at for moving too slowly through a store, spoken to loudly and slowly as though age automatically diminishes intelligence, overlooked in conversations that assume a younger audience by default. This societal invisibility compounds everything we've discussed so far. It's one thing to feel overlooked within your own family. It's another thing entirely to feel overlooked by the culture around you as a whole. To sense in 100 small daily interactions that the world has quietly decided you matter a little less than you used to, simply because of your age. And yet, ironically, this is the generation that built so much of what younger generations now take for granted. The infrastructure, the institutions, the traditions, the hard-won progress of decades of labor and sacrifice. There is something deeply unjust about a culture that benefits so enormously from the work of its elders, while simultaneously making so little space for them once that work is done. For all of this hardship, and it is real, and it deserves to be named honestly rather than glossed over, it would be incomplete and untrue to suggest that growing older is only loss. Alongside every struggle we've discussed, there remain for most elderly people moments of genuine joy, connection, and meaning that continue to matter enormously. A phone call from a grandchild, even a short one, can brighten an entire week. A visit from an old friend, sharing memories that only the two of them fully understand, can restore for an afternoon a sense of connection that felt lost. A family gathering, even a chaotic and imperfect one, can remind an aging parent of exactly why all those years of sacrifice were worth it. Small daily pleasures often take on deeper meaning with age. A warm cup of tea in the morning sunlight, a favorite old song on the radio, tending to a small garden, the simple comfort of a familiar routine. Many elderly people describe a kind of clarity that comes with age, a greater appreciation for small moments, a hard-won wisdom about what actually matters in life, built from decades of experience that younger people simply haven't had time to accumulate yet. There is also, for many, a real and meaningful sense of legacy, watching children and grandchildren grow, seeing values and lessons passed down, carry forward into a new generation, understanding that even after they're gone, some part of what they built, what they taught, what they sacrificed for, will continue on. This sense of legacy, of having mattered, of having contributed something lasting, is one of the quiet sources of strength that helps many elderly people carry the harder parts of this stage of life with grace rather than bitterness. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about everything we've discussed is this. Despite all of it, the physical pain, the loneliness, the fear of dependence, the loss of purpose, the feeling of being overlooked, most elderly people continue to carry all of this with a quiet, largely unacknowledged strength. They wake up each day and keep going. They find small reasons to smile even on hard days. They continue to ask about their children's lives, their grandchildren's activities, even when their own struggles go largely unasked about in return. They continue to give advice, love, encouragement, whatever they still have to offer, even when so much has been taken from them by time. This is, in many ways, the final and perhaps most important chapter of a lifetime defined by sacrifice. Just as they once put their children's needs before their own, just as they once worked tirelessly without much recognition, they now carry the hardships of aging largely in silence, still trying even now to protect the people they love from having to worry too much about them. This isn't weakness. It is one of the most profound forms of strength a person can show. The ability to endure real, daily hardship without demanding attention for it, without turning it into a burden for others, simply because love, even at the end of a long life, still comes first. If you've made it this far, here is the honest truth. Most elderly people are not asking for grand gestures. They're not asking for their children to give up careers or families or their own busy lives. What they're asking for, quietly, rarely out loud, is simply to still matter, to still be seen, to still be heard, not just spoken to. That can look like a phone call that isn't rushed, one where you actually ask, "How are you really doing?" and then stay quiet long enough to hear the honest answer, rather than the automatic "I'm fine" that gets offered out of habit. It can look like including an aging parent in a decision, even a small one, simply to remind them that their voice still counts. It can look like visiting not just on holidays, but on an ordinary Tuesday, for no reason at all except that you wanted to see them. It can look like patience, genuine, unhurried patience, when technology confuses them, when their pace is slower than yours, when a story gets told for the third time. It can look like asking about their past, their memories, their life before you existed in it, because there is enormous dignity in being asked, in having someone genuinely want to know who you were before you were simply mom or dad or grandpa. And if your parents or grandparents or any elderly person who has shaped your life are still here with you today, this week, on reach out, not out of guilt but out of love. Because the hardest truth in all of this is simple. One day that phone call won't be possible anymore. One day the chance to simply say "I love you" and "I see you" and "everything you gave up for me mattered" will be gone. Don't wait for that day to arrive before you say it. How long did you talk to your parents today? Think about it honestly. And if this moved you, really moved you, don't just scroll past it. Call someone today. That's worth more than any comment, any like, any share. If this story stayed with you, follow for more honest, heart-centered stories like this one. There are more voices, more stories, more truths worth telling and worth truly listening to.